Welcome to the Quantum Healthy Podcast. I'm Andia, a licensed addiction counselor, and along with my co-host, Laura Kissman, a quantum nutritionist, we will be inviting expert scientists, clinicians, survivors, and thrivers to distill their pearls of wisdom attained from applying quantum biology to their fields of research and everyday lives. Our goal is to bring you easy to understand principles and practices about the study of light, water, and magnetism so you can take your health into your own hands. When it comes to light, we often think sunshine first, but it is equally important to honor the darkness. We talk a lot about avoiding artificial blue light at night on this podcast, and that means protecting ourselves from blue and green light after sunset. This sets us up for that melatonin release and quality restorative sleep. This is why Laura and I wear Viva Rays. Unlike typical blue blockers, they design glasses with circadian biology in mind. It is our go-to source for protecting our circadian rhythms. You can use the code Quantum Healthy for a discount. Link is in the show notes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Quantum Healthy Podcast. Today we have Morley Robbins with us, and I'm going to do a short introduction here, but if you don't know who he is a superstar in our space, and we're so excited to have him on today. So welcome, Morley. He is a creator and the founder of the Root Cause Protocol and the Magnesium Advocacy Group. And he is a self-taught mineral expert and author of Cure Your Fatigue, The Root Cause, and How to Fix It on Your Own. So welcome, Morley. We are so happy to have you.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm looking forward to our discussion. And I've been, ever since you extended the invitation, I've been thinking about this. What is quantum? What is quantum healing? And so I know we're going to get into that. I'm looking forward to that. And I think that the focus of the Root Cause Protocol is all about that level, but we never talk about it. It's very interesting when you really begin to understand the movement of energy at that level. That's really what we're preoccupied with. So this will be a very exciting discussion.
Yes, no doubt. Well, why don't we just start with who you are, a little bit of your story, and then we'll go into it from there.
Born into a pretty sickly family. My mom was an alcoholic. My dad was a manic depressive with schizophrenic tendencies. Ooh. And in and out of hospitals. That's where I spent a lot of time. And my older sister became a nurse. Well, I was supposed to become the doctor, right? And that all seemed very doable until I got to college, and it's like, wow, this is a lot of work. And let's just say I wasn't an academic star back then, and I still applied, didn't get in. I'll never forget the one day when I got 12 letters of rejection from different medical schools across the country. Not that there's any kind of collusion, right? But in any event, I, for many years, thought I didn't get in because I wasn't smart. And then I started to meet doctors and was just kind of curious about birth order, and started to discover that most doctors, you can test this on your end, most doctors are firstborns. And why is a firstborn important? Because they defend the status quo. They don't challenge authority. They do what they're told to do. Well, that was not me. I mean, I basically grew up without a dad, so I've been a nonconformist my whole life, and I asked different types of questions. And so that, when I didn't get into medical school, I went to business school, because if you can't be a doctor, you're going to be a hospital executive. You're going to boss the doctors around. So I did that for 12 years, and then wanted to pick it uptown, and I became a consultant for 20 years, and solving complicated problems in complicated organizations. And you move around the country on airplanes, and you're pulling a suitcase the whole time. So I was pulling a suitcase for 20 years, and then developed what's called frozen shoulder, and couldn't pick my hand up above my waist. And so I went to a health food store that I had frequented for many years, complaining of my children. And they said, well, you need to go see Dr. Liz. And I said, I don't do witchcraft. Just sell me some supplements, because I knew doctor and first name that was a chiropractor.
Because supplements aren't witchcraft, right?
Right. Of course, I know, right? Or pharmacopoeia, right? Witchcraft. And so they sold me some supplements. They did no good. I couldn't sleep. I was in so much pain. I went back about 2 months later. I said, look, you must have something stronger. And the owner of the store was there that day. And she said, Morley, we love you. Go see Dr. Liz. So with my tail between my legs, I went to see Dr. Liz. And folks may not know that there's a muscle in here called the pterygoid muscle,
Yes.
which operates the jaw. Well, it controls the shoulder. I didn't know that. And Dr. Liz put on a little finger cot and went inside my mouth, and with the full weight of her body, put pressure on that muscle that was it was locked up. And as she put pressure on it, and as she met the pressure, my arm started to lift. And it was a miracle. It was the closest I wanted to get to a miracle. And I mean, I just kind of looked at her, and it was like the proverbial thorn being taken out of my paw. And she used a phrase I'd never heard in 32 years of working in hospitals. She talked about an innate healer, the healer within. And I looked at her, I didn't say anything to her, but I thought to myself, if there's an innate healer, I want to find out who that is. And so I set out to do research, and I've been researching now for 15 years, 7 days a week, 2 to 3 hours a day. Now it's more like 3 to 4 hours a day, but back then it was 2 to 3 hours, reading peer-reviewed literature and books. And I mean, I'm embarrassed to tell you how many articles I've read, but what my gift was in the world of business and consulting was I was really good at pattern recognition. I could take data and I could really begin to see what the pattern was and where it was going. Got involved in a lot of forecasting projects. And what was interesting was that the stint with the frozen shoulder was coinciding with a project I was doing with colleagues, 3 different hospital systems in North Carolina. This was back in 2008. Wanted to know what the demand for healthcare was going to be like in 2025. We're here. And it was just, and every one of the disease indexes was a hockey stick. You know what a hockey stick is, right, Laura?
I used to play hockey.
Yeah, of course. And so every one of them was a hockey stick. And I thought, I can't stay on the sidelines. I can't, I've got to be a part of this. I didn't know what that meant. I said, I need to get engaged. I can't be studying it. I've got to begin to solve it. And I started taking coaching classes and wellness coaching, and we got very much involved in standard process, and then did a lot of nutritional counseling, Freddie Ulan's nutritional response testing. And I've never looked back. And long story short, I wrote the book, Cure Your Fatigue, put the brackets around the CU so we can see the symbol for copper. And the bottom line is that bioavailable copper is what guarantees our innate healing. That's really what runs the body. And it's absolutely mystical. I think it's our connection to source. It has a unique relationship to the sun. It's the only mineral that has a magnetic connection to sunlight. It's the only metal that has a connection to ammonia. But what is sunlight and ammonia? That's the beginning and end of life.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And so when we get into the discussion, I can get into what I think are some of the most important enzymes. And what's an enzyme? It's a little engine that makes things happen. And I've got a very dear colleague, Martha Carlin, who studies the microbiome, and she's convinced that the enzymes are being expressed through life forms. And there's something to be said for that. It's absolutely fascinating. But the fact of the matter is, we live in a world that depends on energy, and we live in a world where we have to have batteries. Well, these microbial enzymes need a copper battery in order to do their work. And if the battery's not there, it doesn't work. And when you begin to pull back the curtain on changes that have occurred in farming, in food processing, and in the world of pharmaceuticals over the last century, it doesn't take a lot of configuring to realize that copper is in the crosshairs. And the reason why I say that is that bioavailable copper runs many, many different pathways, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But really what it guarantees is sovereignty. It provides health freedom so you are not medically dependent. Well, the system's set up for medical dependence. And so they've got to get rid of copper. And they've been doing it methodically for a century. And I can go chapter and verse when it started, how they, I mean, it's like there's a wow factor to it. And if everyone says, "Oh, Morley, you're a conspiracist,"
Conspiracy.
yeah, and you know, there's 92 minerals that are in the sea, and I'm like, yeah, I get that, but the minerals are in a hierarchy. Now, there's some people who think I'm in the Illuminati because I have this triangle behind my. It's actually a beautiful print of Egyptian healing, and it's just a phenomenal design. Cost a fortune. But Dr. Liz and I found it in a art show years and years ago. And I'd say, yeah, there are 92 minerals, but at the very top is copper. It's unmistakable what the pecking order is, because copper creates energy. Copper clears exhaust. Copper catalyzes enzymes. Copper combats all enemies. Every pathogen, bacteria, fungus, virus, or parasite caves in the presence of copper. And those are just 4 of the dozen macro activities that copper does. And the real job is to manage the relationship between iron and oxygen on the planet. We live on a planet with 21% oxygen. Well, it's a poison, but we can't live without it, but we can't die without it either. And so iron and oxygen like to do what? Interact, create rust. And so we know what a rusty nail looks like, or rusty pipe, or rusty car. We didn't know that the rusting process called plaque inside our body is the exact same dynamic. All, you know, the coronary artery calcification scores that people live and die by. Well, the calcium gets released because of oxidative stress caused by excess iron in the endothelium. It's like, but you have to keep pulling back the curtain. And years ago, I was supposed to write a book on magnesium with a noted cardiologist. I won't mention his name. And I knew it was not going to happen because he and I did not see the problem the same way. And I said, well, aren't you at all concerned about oxidative stress? And he was up in New York and I was down in Louisiana at the time. He said, oh, you want to pull the curtain all the way back. And I went, excuse me? He didn't want people to know about oxidative stress. And I just ripped it open. I said, look, we obviously don't see eye to eye on this. And I think that's the tragedy, is that there are 32,000 conditions profiled in the Merck manual, which is the Bible for conventional medicine. And how many of them begin with oxidative stress? 100% of them.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
And what is oxidative stress? Well, the most important enzyme function, you want to get quantum?
Mm-hmm.
The most important enzyme function is to turn oxygen, O2, into 2 molecules of water. Now, that's a 4-step process. We got to create superoxide, hydrogen peroxide, hydroxyl radical, and then we create water. But the multi-copper oxidase enzymes, the MCOs, we have 1,000 different forms in our gut. That's a good thing to know. But they do it like that. In one fell swoop, that is quantum turning oxygen into water. And it's why we're on this planet. And people don't know about the great oxygen event that took place 3.4 billion years ago. Prior to oxygen coming on the scene, it was anaerobic. It was iron and sulfur was the primordial sea. Bacteria, cyanobacteria, right? Sky blue, cyano. They started to engage in interaction with this orb up in the sky called the sun. And they engage in what's called photosynthesis. And what gets given off in photosynthesis? Oxygen. And most people don't know that there are 3 enzymes in photosynthesis. There's photosystem 2. I think it's manganese dependent. There's photosystem 1, which is magnesium dependent, but there's an enzyme in the middle, and it's called plastocyanin. Plastocyanin is the bridge between photosystem 2 and photosystem 1, and it allows the electrons to move from one system to the other, and it's copper dependent. And there are 8 plastocyanin enzymes in ceruloplasmin, which is the copper protein that no one's ever heard about, which runs mammalian physiology on planet Earth. And so it's what really inspired this was years ago, I think it was 2017, a very dear friend of mine bought a day of consulting with a world-renowned natural food consultant. His name was Michael Greenberg. He's a really big name. And he started the meeting out. He said, Morley, everybody wants to know what's new. Hey, what's new, Michael? What's new? And he said, after years and years, he said, I realized to focus on what's enduring. And when he said that to me, that's what inspired me to, for some reason, I was drawn to oxygen. I wanted to know, was oxygen always on the planet? And then to find out it wasn't always on the planet. And that when oxygen became 0.1% on planet Earth, 99% of life disappeared because it was all anaerobic.
Mm.
And that's an important thing to know. And so the reason why we're here, the reason why we're having this switched on conversation about a very switched on topic using very switched on technology is that higher life forms needed more energy to evolve. And that came by way of oxidizing fuel, courtesy of what? Oh yeah, that copper thing. And it made it all possible. And nobody knows that. The astrobiologists know it. Robert Crichton knows it. Douglas Kell knows it. These luminary scientists, but it's not taught to practitioners. It's not taught to the common person because we're like mushrooms. Keep us in the dark. You know, we're not supposed to know these things. And minerals they're the spark plugs of life, but there is a pecking order, and it's just like that triangle behind me, that copper regulates iron. And if it doesn't regulate iron and oxygen, you're going to have oxidative stress. Because if oxygen doesn't turn into water at the courtesy of copper, you're going to create oxidants, accidents with oxygen. And then they can't be turned into water. And then you don't have energy. And that's the pioneering work of Douglas Wallace at Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
About cellular energy deficiency. And we've just come full circle back to the quantum field about the importance of making energy.
Oh, wow. I'm so glad you explained that last little bit about the oxygen getting to water. And if it doesn't,
Yeah.
without the copper, then where
And
are
that's
we?
the precursor to every symptom is oxidative stress. And it disrupts the signaling, it disrupts the energy production. And there is no disease. It was like 8 or 9 years ago, and I went on Facebook. I just was in a funky mood that day, sparky mood. And I said, there is no such thing as medical disease. There's only metabolic dysfunction caused by stress-induced mineral deficiencies. And I thought for sure someone would take me to task. Well, what do you know? You're not a doctor, blah, 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 blah. You know, in 8 years, not one person has ever challenged that statement. So there is no disease. It's all in our mind. We have these terms tattooed on our forehead. Oh, I'm diabetic. Well, I have congestive heart failure. I have estrogen dominance, whatever the topic du jour is.
Mhm.
But there is no disease. And it all comes back to the mismanagement of oxygen, which creates the mismanagement of energy, which creates dysfunction. And then the symptoms appear. And we go to a book like the Merck Manual. Oh yeah, I've got those symptoms. And because we're human, we're very gullible. And we read the description of that condition and we believe that bullshit. And it's a narrative. The whole thing is a narrative.
But we like to categorize, right? Like we like to
Sure.
categorize things.
This is
And,
why I
and,
love
and
studying
people, then they become that disease and they lose their perspective. I'm sorry, Andrea. Go.
Mm.
That's okay. I was saying this is why I love studying the mitochondria. I love studying this information because I feel like it reveals truth. And like that's what you're doing. You're revealing truth. And these are important things for people to know. And it's what this podcast is for, is to spread this truth. And yeah, you just explained everything so nice. And one of the things I've heard you say, Laura noted here, is the brainwashed meme. And I think we should mention that because it applies
Of
here.
of
Oh,
modern medicine.
yeah, you're anemic and you're copper toxic. Is that what you're thinking of, or is there another one?
Yes.
No,
No, that's it.
Yeah, right.
yeah.
And I've gone on record as saying there is no such thing as anemia. I just don't think it exists. I mean, it's so heretical. I say it just to agitate people, but the confusion is people don't know the numbers, and I have to be very careful. A friend of mine said, Morley, people know three numbers: 1, 2, and a lot. And I will regularly go into hyperbolic terminology, but I think it's helpful to know that as it relates to iron metabolism, every second of every day, we turn over 2.5 million red blood cells. Now, think about that. Every second, we've been talking now for how long? We've been talking for a good 35 minutes, times 60, times 2.5 million. And in the course of 24 hours, we turn over 200 billion red blood cells. So I'm curious, how many iron atoms are in one red blood cell? Turns out it's a billion.
Wow.
It's like, wow, that sounds like a lot of iron. Well, what's really fascinating about it is that, it takes 25 milligrams of iron, 100 billion red blood cells. So 25 milligrams of iron is nothing. It's not even the size of a head of a 1-inch stick pin. So 25 milligrams of iron, we need it every day. And most people think that they're supposed to eat 25 milligrams of iron. We need 25 milligrams of dietary iron. At least that's what the world of convention would tell you. And it turns out it was in 1942 when Max Weintraub, who was from Canada, he was raised in Canada, went to medical school in Canada, then went down to, why he went to Louisiana to get his PhD at Tulane in hematology. And he ends up writing the very first textbook on hematology in 1942. But he's the guy who identified 24.4 milligrams of iron needed to support the turnover of iron. And what no one knows is that 95% of that iron, 24 of the 25 milligrams, comes from a recycling system that's run by copper, courtesy of the spleen, courtesy of the bone marrow, courtesy of the liver. And only one milligram a day, 5%, but 1 milligram a day is supposed to come through our mouth. And years ago, it was actually 7 years ago, on my 65th birthday, I reached out to Robert Crichton, he's the dean of iron biology on the planet. I didn't know him from Adam. I got his phone number. I called him up just to see if he would answer, and he did. It was really kind of fun. And I said, Dr. Crichton, would you do me a favor? He said, sure. What would you like? I said, would you send me a signed copy of your latest textbook? He said, I would be honored. And so as he's getting my mailing address and stuff, he said, now we accumulate 1 milligram of iron every day we're on the planet. I said, yes, sir. I've read your books. I've read your articles. And that's not taught anywhere. 1 milligram of iron every day we're on the planet. So quick, get out your calculator, get your age, multiply it times 365. Well, I've got 26,000 milligrams of iron running my body. Well, the average man should have 5,000. The average woman should have 4,000. And so we have multiples of the amount of iron, and we just blow past that. We don't pay any attention to this giant magnet in our body that creates what? Oh yeah, oxidative stress, if it's not being managed by the copper. That's one of the most important things to understand is we have this magnetic attraction to iron, and there's no way to get rid of it except blood loss. Only way you can eliminate excess iron, and there's only two reasons why women outlive men. Did you know that? Only two reasons.
I know one.
One, women are smarter.
Okay. That
That's
wasn't the one.
I know that, but that's a biological fact. And the second is women have 40 years of natural blood loss every month. And they've been taught to hate that experience, demonize that experience, when in fact it's one of the most sacred experiences you can have, is to go through that cycle. And it's easy for a guy to say that. I get it. But the fact of the matter is there are many women who practice the root cause protocol who worship at the altar of their restored menstrual cycle because they're so grateful to have the natural ability to get rid of the excess iron. And that, again, that should be the cornerstone of medicine, is this is a great way to lower the oxidative stress in your body. Dump your iron. So we talk about quarterly blood donations for men and for menopausal women and for women who are in their menstruating years, at least twice a year, but there are many women who do it still 4 times a year. And one of the funnier consults I did, I was talking to a client who was a woman, and I said, "Are you still cycling?" And she said, "Oh no, I haven't been on a bike for years." So I said, "Wait a minute, hold on," But I think it's a very important piece of the puzzle for women to know what their biological advantage is. And in the second edition of the book, Cure Your Fatigue, we're going to have a chapter devoted to women's health to explain why PMS happens, why POMC happens, why fibroids happen, why is there such a thing as unexpected abortions of children? What is a miscarriage? And so we can explain it so people, because I think they think they're broken or they did something wrong, when in fact the oxidative stress has been building in their body for generations. And so in my family, I'm probably the 4th or 5th generation of imbalance. Right? My mom, who was the alcoholic, and my dad, who had behavioral issues, they were the 3rd or 4th generation. And everything really began to change with the First World War. Just a lot of changes in farming and food processing, as you know. But when the real seismic shift was in 1941 in UK, in Canada, and in the United States, they started adding iron filings to wheat flour, to the flours. And we've never been the same. Again, give credit to where it should be given. Jim Moon, his pen name was JYM. He's a PhD iron toxicologist from Canada, don't you know? And he wrote a wonderful book called Iron, the Most Toxic Metal.
Really?
And it's a wonderful book. I've read it 5 times. Every time I read it, I learn something new. And I would encourage people who have an active interest in this to better understand this element. It's the #1 element on planet Earth. 36% of the Earth's composition is iron. Well, that's the master pro-oxidant on the planet. And he has an entire chapter on how iron causes cancer. And people need to read that. They need to understand what that's all about. And this idea that you're anemic, it's all programming. And then to demonize copper. Oh yeah, you're copper toxic. I'm like, really? I mean, it's why I'm here, right? It's why I'm able to have energy. It's why my 40 quadrillion mitochondria work is because of copper. That's 15 zeros, folks. 40 quadrillion mitochondria. And when we think about mitochondria, we go back to our high school biology text, right? The picture of the cell, right? And there were what, 1 or 2 mitochondria. Well, what people don't know is that picture was drawn by Walt Disney and it has nothing to do with reality. The average cell has 500 mitochondria. The average liver cell, 2,000 mitochondria. Average kidney cell, 4,000. Heart cell, cardiomyocytes, 10,000 mitochondria. Mature egg in a woman's body, how many mitochondria do you think are in there? Any guesses?
It's like 500,000 or something. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
Right from like 200,000 to 600,000. Oh, you think maybe PMS is because they don't have enough mitochondria? Yeah, I think so. It makes perfect sense. And then there are brain regions. There's certain neurons in the brain, like the substantia nigra, has 2 million mitochondria. And what is Parkinson's disease? The formal designation of Parkinson's disease is when 2/3 of the neurons of the substantia nigra are no longer functioning. Well, there's 980,000 neurons in the substantia nigra, times 2 million, and when 66% are no longer functioning, and we're supposed to believe in disease, and we're supposed to ignore the iron accumulation that causes the mitochondrial dysfunction, kills the neuron. It's not rocket science. It really isn't. And what people don't realize is that there's both a cellular and a systemic iron recycling program. And I'm embarrassed to tell you, when did I figure that out? Last week. I've read that in thousands of articles. Oh yeah, cellular, systemic, I get it. Okay, but I didn't get it. I knew the systemic, the reticular system, which is a funny way of saying recycling. And it's really run by the spleen, and nobody knows about the spleen. It's the hidden organ. And we're supposed to focus on the liver, we're supposed to focus on the pancreas or the heart. Don't talk about the spleen. Oh my gosh, you're going to spoil the surprise. And it turns out that that's at a systemic level, that 2.5 million per second is taking place in the spleen. But that there's a cellular recycling. And what is iron? It's a waiter carrying oxygen, right, to the cell. And what I think is the most amazing gap in science is no one knows how oxygen gets from the cell to the mitochondria. And so I was talking with a colleague, and they had a PhD in biochemistry, and I said, how does oxygen get into the mitochondria? He said, oh, it's passive diffusion. I said, no. I said, we're talking about the second most reactive element on the planet, oxygen, second to fluorine gas. And it's just going to passively diffuse into the, I said, it's got to be actively managed. And the closest we've gotten to understanding it is Wittenberg in 2007. And they threw up their hands and said, we don't know how it happened, which is, it's like, wow, that's like maybe the most important nutrient to get to the mitochondria so we can turn it into water so we can release the energy, and nobody knows. And so at the cellular level, it turns out that the mitochondria are the terminal destination for iron and oxygen. They're delivering the payload of oxygen. Oxygen does not create energy. The conversion of oxygen to water allows the release of 3-ADP, complex 4, to go over to complex 5 to become ATP. And so everyone has a kitchen, and I think everyone has a stove in their kitchen, right? Well, it turns out that in the mitochondria at complex 4, there's 2 heme proteins. It's a very important protein, and it has iron at the center. Well, those 2 heme proteins hold oxygen. And in every kitchen I know of has a stove. But does the stove know what's for dinner? No. Does the stove know what temperature to turn the oven on? Does the stove know which pot should be put on what burner? No. It requires a chef, right? And the complex 4 has a chef called cytochrome C oxidase. And that's the copper enzyme that slices and dices oxygen, adds 4 electrons, adds 4 hydrogen protons, and turns it into 2 molecules of water in a nanosecond. And then it goes over to complex 5, which is spinning at 500 revolutions per second. Now, if we practice, we could probably do 1 revolution per second. If we really worked hard at it, we probably could do 2 in our pirouette without falling. But 500 per second,
Wow.
and these electron transport chains are like pancakes stacked inside the mitochondria. Nobody really knows how many electron transport chains there are in a mitochondria, much less in one cell, much less inside an organ. And the numbers get so mind-numbingly big, people get overwhelmed by that. And so we have to bring it back down to, well, we can't make energy without bioavailable copper. And the stumbling block for me for years was I knew the oxidative phosphorylation, the different complexes that really accelerate the production of ATP, but I could never understand where copper fit into the Krebs cycle. And Hans Krebs was a brilliant scientist and clinician, as you know. He actually worked with Otto Warburg for 4 years, from
Did he?
1926 to 1930. And what's really comical is to read the articles that they wrote, to see them arguing with each other as to whose idea the study was. But Krebs studied copper in human physiology. And he's the guy who figured out that women, when they get pregnant, have an explosion of copper. And that's what allows life to take place. And maybe in a subsequent conversation, we can get into the details of that.
I thought it was a zinc spark.
It's more complicated than that.
I bet.
And that's, yeah. I've had that conversation with a number of physicians. They want to come back with the zinc. My money's on copper. But the thing is that the mitochondria is where it's at. And people don't know that. They don't understand. And what is critical is the Krebs cycle, because it's creating what are called the reducing equivalents. Well, they're just chemicals that allow the rest of the mitochondria to work. And I mean, I've been around and around and around trying to figure out where's copper in this mechanism. And I found a shrimp study, crustacean study, just like 10 days ago. And they withheld copper from the shrimp to see what would happen to energy production. And there are 9 genes in the Krebs cycle, and 7 of the 9 genes downregulated when there wasn't copper. And so it's at a gene level that copper was essential for optimal expression of the gene to allow for the proteins and enzymes of the Krebs cycle to work. And I was like, that makes so much sense. And yet we don't think about it in those terms. We're supposed to think that copper's toxic. And it's like, there's so much more to the story. And the conditioning of the conventional mind today is kind of frightening.
Morley, can I ask how can someone know that they're deficient in copper and maybe toxic in iron, I guess, is just from tests? Like, I'd love to ask you, like, do you just look at people and just know, or you know by their diagnoses, or do you recommend that practitioners test? And what would the tests be?
Yeah.
One answer would be, are they under stress? Anyone under stress has a dysregulation of magnesium and copper. That's a guarantee. And as soon as copper is wobbling, iron's going to create the ultimate stress on planet Earth is oxidative stress. That's what takes us out. Oh yeah, I've got cancer, I've got heart disease, I've got, diabetes, whatever no, it's oxidative stress that eventually robs you of your energy and you die.
We
It's
often think it's mitochondrial dysfunction. We use that term.
I know, right. And a
Right.
lot of very high profile pundits use mitochondrial dysfunction, but then tap them on the shoulder and say, take it down a notch,
That's right.
take it down another notch. And they can't do it. They can't do it. I mean, I'd love to have a conversation with Thomas Seyfried at Boston College. Let's talk about mitochondrial dysfunction. He never uses the word copper. Jack Cruz never talks about copper.
I've had a client with cancer just reach out personally to Dr. Thomas Seyfried, and and very kindly he's given instructions, you know, of
That's
what to do,
beautiful.
but you don't see copper anywhere in there.
No. And what's the cutting edge treatment for cancer? It's vitamin A retinol therapy coupled with iron chelation therapy. It's like, really? Iron's involved in, do you know when they first wrote about iron causing cancer? It was, I just love this name. Montrose T. Burroughs. He was a 1909 graduate of Johns Hopkins Medical School. So I grew up in Baltimore. My nickname is Baltimorley. So I worship at the altar of Hopkins. But Dr. Burroughs finds himself working at the Rockefeller Institute. Our sphincter should be tightening up right about now.
Yep.
And in 1925, he wrote an article that clearly indicated that retinol deficiency causes cancer. The following year, he writes 4 articles, 1926A, B, C, and D, continuing his research about retinol deficiency causing cancer. In 1926, there was a dispute as to who was going to get the Nobel Prize. Was it going to be Otto Warburg? And the prize was going to be what causes cancer. And Otto Warburg, and I'm blanking on the, oh my goodness, the recipient, the Nobel Committee argued for a year. And they finally awarded it to the other scientists who said that cancer was caused by a parasite, and which sent Warburg into a rage.
Was it Fibinger or a name like that?
Thank you very much, Fibinger. Fibinger must have caught wind of Montrose's research. He writes an article in 1928 denouncing his Nobel Award for parasites, saying actually it's retinol, and he dies 4 months after writing the article. It's like, wow, that's fascinating. And then we don't really pick up the trail until 2016, when Hammerling from Germany talks about the signalosome. We're getting into some really heavy duty stuff.
Whoa.
But the signalosome, it turns out there's a part of the electron transport chain where the retinol molecule needs to be in that complex. And the electron from complex 3 getting to complex 4 rides the carbon tail of the retinol atom. It's absolutely amazing. And what Dr. Hammerling says is retinol deficiency creates the Warburg effect. And then he connects it back to the research of Dr. Montrose T. Burroughs. And nobody knows about this. All we know about is, everyone's got turbo cancer now, not knowing what happened 5 years ago. And the world doesn't realize how important retinol is, because everyone eats what? Oh, a low-fat diet. I sit in Starbucks for a few hours in the morning, and I'm amazed at the number of people who order skinny lattes. You can't find full-fat yogurt in the supermarket. I mean, you have to really hunt to find full fat. Everything's lean meat. They cut the meat off. They cut the fat off the meat.
It's years and years of brainwashing.
Of course.
You can't find lard or tallow or anything like that in the grocery store. You got to go to, you got to go source it yourself, find
That's
it.
exactly right. And our, study the work of Weston A. Price.
Yep.
And he was all about retinol.
Morley, he was Canadian.
I know he was. I know.
Yeah.
And I also know why he went on that search with his wife. Do you know the story?
I do, but I've not read this book, but please share.
It's absolutely amazing. I always like to know the story behind the story. Why did this preeminent dentist from up north of the border, who ends up in, I think, Cleveland, I guess that was close enough to Canada, but he does a root canal on his 12-year-old son. And his son had a infection for 4 years. And then his son died. And he and his wife were so shattered by that. That's what sent him on his quest to find perfect teeth, so that no one would ever have to go through that tragedy. And what Dr. Price knew is that when we're starting out as a fetus, we have 32 buds that then split and become 64 buds. Well, 32 become our teeth. What do the other 32 become? Our spine. Dr. Price knew that perfect teeth meant perfect spine, meant perfect health. And now, the really fun news is Dr. Liz is my wife, and I'm a firm believer in chiropractic. I tell people to get chiropractic care all the time because their gift to humanity is they know how to turn off the sympathetic nervous system that's stressing you out and to turn on the parasympathetic nervous system to calm you down. And it's amazing what they know that we don't fully understand, and certainly has been denounced by the world of conventional healing. And no, it's a magical story of what drove him to do that research. And his going in proposition was that everyone would be vegetarian and they would be eating a low-fat diet. He knew that was going to be the case. And because he was a consummate scientist, what he profiled was that he studied 14 different communities. They all had animal protein, from whale blubber in Inuit Indians in Alaska to ants in Maasai tribesmen in Africa. And I think it's like 60 to 65% of their calories came from fat, which was shocking to him. But then as he began to study, he understood why. But that's not considered acceptable. What is it? Sally Fallon calls them the dietary technocrats, or whatever her term of derision is. But yeah, we're so programmed in disinformation. It's really disorienting.
I know. There's so much undoing that we need to do so we can just see actually how simple things are. Like whenever I
They
talk to
really are.
people like you, it's just like this is actually more simple than the complicated stuff it got turned into, just to hide it from us or whatever that story is, programming or whatever. It's, yeah. I mean, it's really humbling that it's so simple because it allows, like, I don't have any, I never went to school to be a doctor or attempted to or whatever. And it allows people to understand and really take back their health into their own hands, which is really empowering. And you're
Yeah, I
helping
think it is.
people do that.
Yeah, and that's really that is what was behind the start of the root cause protocol, was to empower people to become the CEO of their health,
Mm-hmm.
and to really step away from this dependency. Oh, I've got to have a priest to walk. No, you don't need a priest. Our goal is for the individual to be the guru, and all we are is a guide. Let them be the guru. And when I started out, I was very Newtonian. There's some particle that's missing, some nutrient, some mineral, some vitamin. And now 15 years later, I'm totally quantum. And what's really at the base of it, and I think you all would certainly embrace this, is emotional distress. Once people perceive that they're under stress, it sets into play oxidative stress. They can't make energy optimally. And the most important variable from our standpoint is that individual's natural belief in their body's ability to heal itself. And if you don't believe that, it doesn't matter what you do, whether you're doing root cause protocol or doing quantum healing or doing the most whiz-bang conventional. If you don't believe the body has the natural ability, you will not get well.
Yeah.
And what happens is, if you have an unresolved emotional event from your past, and who doesn't have that? What do you think a 6-year-old little boy thought when his dad ran away from home because he didn't want to have electric shock therapy? Well, I thought I'd caused my dad to run away. And I only carried that wound for 51 years, right? Until I did emotional freedom technique. This practitioner, my world went from black and white to Kodachrome in 2 sessions. It was absolutely amazing. But the thing is, if you have an emotional event, it's unresolved, it's going to trigger fear. But we've got to spell fear properly, FE-AR, because then you become a magnet for the iron. And as long as you have that unresolved issue, you're just going to keep accumulating more and more iron. And how does that actually happen? Well, when you're in a state of stress, 2 hormones get released, cortisol and adrenaline. And cortisol locks up copper, and adrenaline drives iron deeper and deeper into the tissue. And it's absolutely amazing. And we're designed to respond to bursts of stress, the lions charging you, or you're having a fight with someone. But then we're supposed to go back to the campfire and chill out. Or we spend 90% of our time fighting a paper tiger, and our body gets totally ravaged by that, and totally minerally dysregulated by that. And it's as Andy, as you're saying, it's not complicated to bring it back into balance, but it takes time, and it takes discipline to say, I believe I can do it. And everybody wants a quick fix. Everybody wants to get well yesterday. And what's really fascinating is people would rather pop a pill, a supplement, some herb, rather than release the emotions that are causing the dysregulation. And I'm sure you've seen that in your practice. I think it's fascinating.
Fear is fear is a very low vibration emotion, and it's one of the most,
Right.
it's one of the emotions that, I help people understand, because when you're recovering from addiction, there's so much fear coming at someone at all angles. And you just like blew my mind open on, I thought it was important before, but it is another level of importance now that you just framed it like that, of the different spelling of fear like that. I really never knew how to articulate how the emotions can really impact
Oh,
somebody's health. But there are so many underlying health conditions when someone has addiction, not to mention, of course, there's the person using the substance, they're going to do damage, they're going to do mitochondrial damage, but there's all those underlying things happening. It's no
right.
wonder.
What is addiction? Lack of dopamine. What's the best way to make dopamine? Well, you better have copper, and sugar is a bad alternative, but it'll get you there. And what's the fastest sugar on the planet? Alcohol. And what does alcohol burn up in the liver? Copper. And when copper's down, what accumulates in the liver? Iron, right? And so this is not rocket science. It really isn't. And yet people don't know these basic facts. They've never been taught. And the whole emotional side of it, a wonderful article, if you haven't read it already, is by Zamin Pira, Zamin Pira, 2019. And it talks about the role of chronic stress to create fear and cancer. It's an absolute mind-blowing article and they go into the hormones, and they don't talk about the minerals. I mean, I probably should write an article to explain it, but the point is they're able to articulate how these hormones set the stage for the condition we call cancer. Well, there is no cancer disease. There's cancer metabolism. One of my favorite books, if you haven't read this,
No.
wonderful book, Ravenous. It's a story about Otto Warburg.
Yeah.
And he was convinced that the cancer cell was ravenous for sugar. And the author, Sam Apple, does a masterful job of profiling all the research that Warburg engaged in. And it's not ravenous for sugar, it's ravenous for iron. And iron changes, yeah, right, really. And there's an axis in the body between iron and sugar, and there's another axis in the body between copper and fat. And so I would argue, and I don't have any training. Someone made reference to, I think they were in a veil, they were referring to me less than ideally educated. I took that as a compliment. You ask better questions when you're not conforming to the system. But the whole basis of how the body responds to fat using copper, well, I really think our mitochondria were designed to burn fat, and they've been turned into sugar factories in the modern era. Why would the healthiest people on the planet that were discovered by Dr. Price be eating 65% of their calories coming from fat? and yet we're supposed to be pounding down the carbs. It just, and I don't want to get into the food wars, because humans are the only animals that ask each other what to eat. And it's so tiring. Oh, should I be vegan? Should I be, should I go keto? Should I go carnivore? And it's like, eat intuitively, eat what feels right. And
Local,
eat
seasonal.
local, eat
Yeah.
in season. Yes, thank you. And there's a wonderful nutritionist out there called the glucose goddess. If you haven't talked to her, would encourage you to do that.
Okay,
And
we'll find her.
she has a wonderful video about, she said, okay, in the last 10,000 years, we've turned a gray wolf into a chihuahua. Wow, she's right. It's amazing. The amount of change that's taken place in the canine in that 10,000 years. She said, but we've also turned a 3-inch fibrous fruit that had very little sugar into a foot-long sugar factory. And we think we're getting our potassium. No, you're getting hosed with all the sugar. And people just don't realize that. They don't understand what's happening to their body. And
we would argue the wrong light code for probably
oh,
where you live in Canada, that foot long
exactly.
sugar
It makes
pill.
sense. No one in their right mind would eat that, right?
Right.
And when I start hammering on fruit, fructose sugar, oh my gosh, the pushback. Don't take my fruit away from me. People just go crazy. But think about our ancestors. How much fruit did they really have? Maybe they had a couple of fruit trees. If they had expertise, they might have had an orchard, but it was all seasonal. And then they would can it, and they didn't have 4 servings of fruit a day. It's just, people just don't think about what our ancient ancestors might have had in the way of access to food, and what their options might have been, regardless of where they might have lived. It's gotten so distorted now.
My
Because
mom would send us out to pick blueberries while we had wild blueberries at our cottage. And it would take us hours to pick enough for the pies that she wanted,
right, read up on hibernating bears and read how many pounds of fruit they eat in a day as they're getting ready to go into hibernation. And it's absolutely mind-blowing. Where do they find the food? So like, how can they do that? But they're going to hibernate. Oh, so if I eat a lot of fruit, maybe that's going to slow down my metabolism? You think? And I had the absolute delight of meeting with Rick Johnson, who's a world-renowned authority on uric acid at the University of Denver and University of Colorado in Denver, Colorado. And it was a fascinating conversation because he professed he knew very little about copper. And I introduced him to 14 different ways that copper would prevent hyperuricemia. And he was mesmerized by it. He said, I had no idea. So it's really fun to introduce really talented people who want to know, really have a curiosity. Is there another way to think about metabolism? And the beauty of minerals is we can really get down to a very granular level. We can get down to the quantum level and really understand how the electrons are flowing and why they're flowing and what's causing a disruption. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And people don't need to understand it at that level. They don't need to become Einstein, but they need we do actually use Einstein's formula in our teachings, E equals mc squared. But we turn it into, it's not, energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. We turn it into energy equals magnesium times copper squared. And it works.
Yeah.
And if you focus on the magnesium, if you focus on the copper, because magnesium is lost in acute stress, copper is lost in chronic stress.
Oh my goodness. Another mic drop.
So when cortisol gets released, it needs to be turned off. It needs to be turned back to cortisone. Well, the enzyme to turn it off is magnesium dependent. So when you're under acute stress, what do you lose? You lose magnesium and the B vitamins. Then you just set the stage for anxiety, because you gotta have magnesium and B vitamins to turn glutamic acid into GABA. if you don't know about the glutamic acid decarboxylase,
I don't know
you
about
took the initials, you steal the initials, GAD, and you turn it into general anxiety disorder
disorder.
because you don't know about glutamic acid decarboxylase. But then on the chronic side, cortisol triggers the synthesis of a very powerful protein called metallothionein. It binds up metals, especially iron, zinc, and copper. When cortisol is on the scene on a regular basis, there's a 4 to 5-fold increase in metallothionein. That's a big increase. But let's take it up a notch. Metallothionein has preferential binding of copper. It will bind copper 1,000 times stronger than it binds zinc or iron. Well, that's an important thing to know. And the body is not being demonic. When you have an acute stressor, you're going to recover. You had an argument with your spouse, you had a bad meal, you've got a deadline, you get the deadline, and then you move on. But if it becomes a chronic condition, like we were living through in the first few years of this decade, well, that's a whole nother situation, because then you enter what's called restraint stress. You feel like you're tied down, you can't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. It really cranks your transmitters and your hormones. And
every time we turned on the TV.
Right, exactly right. And so the cortisol can't be turned off because magnesium's gone. And it's cranking the copper, holding onto the copper, taking it offline. And what the body is really, I think this is just my intuition, what the body is saying is, you can't seem to handle your stress long term. I'm going to take you offline. And that's what happens. And then we enter a state of chronic conditions, fibromyalgia, whatever the debilitating condition might be. And we auger down this loss of energy, less and less energy, and then we can't function. And so the catchphrase within the root cause protocol is ignore the enemies, ignite the energy. Because there's a blueprint that runs the body. There really is a blueprint. The immune system, the metabolic pathways, they know exactly what to do, but there's one requirement. They got to have energy. If the blueprint doesn't have energy, it doesn't know what to do. And what we didn't know was that they were undermining the food. So now we're eating Swiss cheese. It looks normal on the outside, big holes on the inside, and there's no minerals there. And so the body can't restore its spark plugs, can't restore its quantum spark, and then we just auger down, and then we're more controllable. We're less sovereign. Mm-hmm. We're less independent. Is that exactly what's happening? I don't know, but it's a theory that seems to hold water, and it gives people another way to think about their world.
Mm-hmm. I up and ask you something that I've had hundreds and hundreds of clients ask me, why, that are recovering alcoholics, why the sugar cravings? And I've always said, it's because of the way alcohol is metabolized in the body, you're craving sugar. One could also argue that there's cross addiction going on. You're going from one addiction, sugar is a safer one. But you said something a few minutes ago about, you said like, well, there's sugar, but that's not a very good way to do it. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Do you have a theory can you explain that? Why the sugar?
So who founded the 12-step program?
Bill Wilson.
Bill Wilson. What did he want to do originally? He was in Chicago. What was his original 12-step program based on?
I know it was alcohol, but there's sugar. I think that he had a theory on that.
He wanted to give everyone B3, niacin. They caught wind of his strategy. They said, you can't do that. You'll be practicing medicine without a license. And then he had to create the 12-step program because he was going to base his healing on niacin.
What? I did not know that.
That's the story behind the story. And so I have a theory again, I'll never be able to prove it, but I was talking with, this was like 10 years ago, I was talking with Leslie Clavet. It's a guy, he's an MD with a PhD from Harvard. What does he know, right? And he's a copper expert and a cardiologist. And I said, Dr. Clavet, I have this theory that all of the B vitamins are copper dependent and their job is to regulate iron. And he said, well, Morley, that's a fascinating theory. He said, I don't know that I can comment one way or the other. He said, but what I do know for a fact is that folate, B9, is copper dependent. And when he said that, that was a light bulb moment, mic drop, the whole bit. And you start to get into the B vitamins, especially P5P or B12. We know B9 is copper dependent. So B12 has an intrinsic factor, right?
Mhm.
We don't know the intrinsic, we know it has an intrinsic. Do you know what the intrinsic factor is? Do you know what it's called? It's called cubilin, Cubilin.
Not cobalamin.
No, cubilin, it's the mechanism to get B12 into the tissue. Well, I put a hyphen after the U.
Of course.
Cu-Bilin. Well, then let's talk about B6, P5P, pyridine 5 phosphate, right? That's the active form, right? Pyridine 5 phosphate. Well, it turns out that in order to create that active form, it has to interact with an enzyme called pyridine 5 phosphate oxidase. Oxidase means that oxygen needs to be added. There are hundreds and hundreds of oxidase enzymes. Guess what? All of them require copper. Copper is why we're here on planet Earth, because it can metabolize it can metabolize oxygen and iron at the same time and not create rust. And so you begin to pick at all of the B vitamins, and eventually you'll see that there's some way to explain it, that they're trying to prevent oxidative stress. Well, the master antioxidant on the planet is ceruloplasmin. It's one of the largest proteins in the human body, 1,046 amino acids with 8 copper atoms inside it. It's like a tank with 8 soldiers inside. If you've ever seen the movie Fury, you'll quickly understand what I'm talking about. And just like in the movie Fury, there's a little trap door where the guy at the end sneaks out. He's the sole survivor in the movie. Well, there's a trap door in ceruloplasmin, and it's a tyrosine amino acid. And when it gets tweaked by oxidative stress, the copper comes out like diarrhea. And then you've got a neutered protein, and you have what are called unbound copper. Oh, the booga wooga kind, right?
Yeah.
Well, those booga wooga coppers get bound up by trans-cuprine and by histidine, and they're gobbled up right away. And so
we can't be copper toxic.
we can't be copper toxic. And the amount of unbound copper inside the cell is 0.21 zeros followed by a 1. It's called zeptomolar. And there are multiple scientists that have confirmed that. There is no unbound copper inside the cell. And the source of unbound copper and copper toxicity is Carl Pfeiffer, who got his PhD before he got an MD. That should make us nervous. And then became a psychiatrist. That should make us even more nervous. And he's the guy in the late 60s that wrote an article about the zinc-copper ratio. And he introduced the world to copper toxicity. And that was his job. Like Pasteur's job was to convince us that there are bugs in milk that we can't process because our spleen is too stupid. Or Anthony Fauci. All these, as far as I'm concerned, they're all made by the same entity, whatever that is, but they have a job. And Carl Pfeiffer's job was to create insanity around the copper zinc ratio. There is no copper zinc ratio. In the 20s, 30s, and 40s, all of the great scientists of the day, Warburg, Krebs, LVM, Schultz, Stacks. I mean, there was just some amazing scientists. What were they studying? Copper and iron and how energy was being made. Zinc wasn't even on the radar screen. Zinc is the great pretender. And I've got multiple articles, I've got a handful of articles that prove that zinc supplementation kills copper metabolism.
Oh,
Oh my God.
another mic drop.
What was the COVID cocktail?
It was zinc,
Ascorbic
quercetin,
acid, ascorbic acid,
vitamin
high
C,
vitamin D,
and
and
vitamin,
zinc.
right.
Well, when that came on the scene, I knew back in like March of 2020, oh my gosh, they're trying to kill copper because that's the perfect triad to kill copper.
And
I
that was
thought,
alternative people. That wasn't even mainstream medicine.
that's what was so amazing about it. And so people have no idea what happened back then. Guess what vitamin D does? It triggers the production of metallothionein. Oh, think that might affect copper status? What I mean, what is in 1948, Holmberg and Laurel wrote the first scientific article on ceruloplasmin. I should make everyone say it. It's really hard to say.
Ceruloplasmin.
Yeah, good. That's very good.
I'm
Most
trying to
people,
spell it here.
I know, right? But what they pointed out in the first page of the article is that ascorbic acid blows up the ceruloplasmin protein and causes the copper to leak out in the very first page. And what's the cornerstone of our antioxidant program? Ascorbic acid. And it's just,
Which people know as vitamin C, right?
which people
Like
know
people
as vitamin
listening
C.
would only know as vitamin C.
They would know it as vitamin C until they turn it around and they look on the back and they'll see that it's 1,000 milligrams of ascorbic acid. And they're not familiar with whole food vitamin C complex. What they're especially not familiar with is Albert Szent-Györgyi, famous physician, physiologist, brilliant
Biochemist, yeah.
biochemist. Back in the early 1920s, Otto Warburg and Heinrich Weyland were duking it out as to whether it was activated oxygen, Warburg, or activated hydrogen, which was allowing the mitochondria to create water. And this went on for years, arguing back and forth. It was Szent-Györgyi in 1925. He wrote an article. He should have gotten the Nobel Prize for this, but he didn't. He had to wait 12 more years. But in 1925, he published an article, and he said, well, actually, it's two rivers flowing into one. And he talked about the flow of the hydrogen and the electrons to interact with oxygen. He's the guy who figured out how the mitochondria really worked, but they gave the Nobel to Warburg. Why? Because his cousin was Paul Warburg. Do you know who Paul Warburg is? He started the Federal Reserve. Very powerful moneyed interests were behind, and that's, Paul Harvey would go crazy over that. But the thing is, Szent-Györgyi starts working with Hungarian peppers, and he's studying vitamin C ascorbic acid. He's studying hyaluronic acid, not hexauronic acid. What is hexauronic acid? It's an awkward way of saying ascorbic acid. In July 4th, which is a very important day for India and I, it's not as important north of the border. It may become a special day, who knows? But
We still wish you guys happy birthday all the time.
right. Happy July 4th, 1936, 18 months before he gets the Nobel Prize, December of 1937. July 4th, 1936, he writes a letter to the editor of Nature Journal. There's no bigger publication than Nature. That's at the very top of the pecking order of journals.
Mhm.
I've got the article. It's a letter to the editor. He said, ascorbic acid does not cure scurvy. It's in black and white. And he talked about the P factors, referring to permeability factors. That's what cured scurvy. And that is only found in whole food vitamin C, which is a 6-part complex. So whole food vitamin C is like your car. that has an engine and a steering wheel, 4 wheels, and a cover. And that's your car. And that's the whole food vitamin C complex. And the engine of that complex is an enzyme called tyrosinase, one of the most important enzymes on planet Earth. What's a rich source of tyrosinase? Mushrooms. They're amazing, amazing source of tyrosinase. And what do? Well, we're led to believe that, oh, well, all they do is give you skin color, eye color, and hair color. And if
Melanin.
you, yeah, melanin. And if you believe that, I've got to use BMW. I'd love to sell you because there's color all over your body. All of your organs have a color. There's a reason why your heart is red, why your liver is brown, why your gallbladder is green, why your spleen is purple. And when I was explaining this to my students a couple of years ago, there was a surgeon in the group, and she said, Morley, I've never seen a purple spleen. Why is that important? Because the color denotes energy, denotes frequency, denotes vitality, denotes integrity. And if the spleen is not purple, it can't clear 2.5 million red blood cells per second. And why can't it? Because it's got too much iron stuck in the tissue.
It's rusted.
It's rusting. And so it's just, again, something as simple as another one of my things is copper colors everything. All of our connective tissue is made by collagen being knit with elastin. Copper runs the lysyl oxidase enzyme. There's that oxygen thing again. Got to have oxygen to bring collagen and elastin together. And it's like a zipper. And collagen is strength, elastin is flexibility. And when they come together, you have tissue integrity. So what does copper do? Copper connects everything. 45% of the connective tissue, 45% of the cells in our body, 45% blood vessels, ligaments, tendons, 45% of the cells are connective tissue. And it's one enzyme that makes it happen.
So Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, a
EDS.
disease or whatever you want to call it, a condition, is a
Right.
copper deficiency.
Yeah, and they'll tell you there's 6 genetic components to it. Again, there's some very sophisticated research where they've taken animals, they've made them gene defected, and then they feed them copper, and the function comes back. So it's just, people have got to get beyond the, oh, I've got a gene defect, or my MTHFR, or my SOX, my whatever. And just, if you believe in your body's natural ability, it knows what to do. It's got to have energy. It absolutely has to have energy. And you got to get rid of the excess iron. You got to dump the fear. And you got to have the discipline to eat healthy diet. As you noted, Laura, it's got to be local, colorful, seasonal, and just know that you're going to get well. As we were talking about earlier, Andy was saying, it's just amazing how simple it is. And think about it. Why would our maker and Mother Nature make it complicated?
She wants.
It doesn't pass that sniff test. What we didn't know is that they had manipulated the environment to the point where our ancestors would not recognize the dirt that we use to grow food. It's not soil, it's dirt.
Another mic drop.
Right. They when did they start adding sugar to food? The turn of the century. And sugars, why did they do that? Because they had stripped out all the nutrients in processing it. And so they had to make it taste okay. And it was just the early founding of the Bureau of Chemistry here in the States is absolutely comical, because they rode the first director out on a rail in Washington, D.C., because he was trying to shut down Coca-Cola, and they wouldn't have it. So it just, there's some fascinating historical facts that come to light, and you have to kind of step back and just smile and realize that, man, this is a crazy planet. And all we can do is help each other deal with the stress and overcome the oxidative stress so that we can go about learning our lessons, because that's really why we're here. And it isn't necessarily to learn a lesson, it's to learn to express yourself in the truest form that you're meant to be. And that's like, that's why this is such a special experience for me, is that, this kid who started out with some pretty tough years, I'm doing my life's work, and I have the pleasure to have conversations like this with really switched on people and just share the wisdom of Mother Nature. And it's absolutely fascinating when you learn how the physiology really works. When you do get a chance to pull back the curtain and see the quantum field, it's like, wow, it's beautiful. It's absolutely captivating when you have that moment.
Well, oh my gosh. I'm like tingling with gratitude and just, oh my God, Morley, thank you so much. We are at time. I don't want to keep you any longer. And I want to ask you our signature question, especially just after that statement. It's perfect timing. What would you say to our audience? What does quantum healthy mean to you based off of everything you know?
I think the quantum field is all about making energy. And the whole basis of the root cause protocol is to increase the bioavailability of copper so we can optimize energy production and minimize the creation of oxidative stress. Because nothing will kill the quantum field faster than oxidative stress. So I really think that's at the heart of life on planet Earth. There's a very famous biochemist, Paul Kobine, at Auburn University down here in the States. And he said, there would be no life on planet Earth without copper. And he's very sincere about that. You cannot have life without copper. So
Oh,
I think
awesome.
I think it's that simple.
Yeah. No, I love that answer. Thank you. It really wraps up everything we've talked about today, 100%.
Morley, how we want to make sure that people know where to find you, other than this podcast, of course. But where are you on, like YouTube, Instagram, any of the social media? Do you have a website?
Right. We have a Facebook group, the RCP group. There's a Facebook page, RCP page. We have Instagram, YouTube. Our website is RCP123RG, and go to the resources tab and download the manual. It's got a lot of information in there. People always want to reach out and make contact. I'm happy to share my email address is my first and last name, morleyrobbins@gmail.com. Just make sure you spell Morley and Robbins right. And then for the brave few, and there are always people who want to pick up the phone, phone number is area code 847-922-8061.
Love it.
And I actually learned that from a CEO client of mine. I was looking at his business card. He had his cell phone. I said, dude, what are you doing? I said, people just, he said, no, he said, it's just the opposite. He said, if you give out your number, no one will call you. I've had some of the most amazing conversations with people, and I really look forward to doing that going forward. It's just, they have really great questions. They're locked in fear, and they just need to be pointed in the right direction. So I'm happy to do that for folks.
Thank you. I'll make that's in the notes.
Morley, I have the honor of thanking you for coming on today. And a few things I want to say. Well, there's so many I want to say. But first off, I'm just going to say thank you for having a frozen shoulder and all the medical school disappointments that you ended up finding Dr. Liz and this whole journey, teaching us how to really spell letters like fear.
Right? Sure.
Exactly. I have your book. Like I said, it's at my cottage right now, unfortunately. Infusing your metaphors and humor to help us, just to help make there's a lot of biochemistry you shared with us, which will be quite new for a lot of our listeners, but you make it so that it's tangible and easier to digest.
Well, one of my favorite quotations is by way of Einstein.
Okay.
If you can't explain something simply, then you don't understand it.
Don't understand it. Yeah.
And the other one that he said that I think is really very apropos, he said, I'm no genius. I just stayed with the problem longer. And I think that that's true across all disciplines. It's important to stay with it, but to really simplify it so that anyone can understand it and can feel empowered by that knowledge.
But it's like you say, it's taken you, whatever, I don't know, 10,000 15 years and 10,000 papers, but
Yeah.
you can explain it simply, which is just a
Well,
gift.
and I'm absolutely amazed at every day. It's like to discover and understand the cellular iron recycling working in concert with the systemic. It's like I can't tell you how many times I've read it, but now I understand it. And the point is not just to know something, but to understand it. And it's like there's a certain grace that comes with that kind of awareness. And you can kind of relax and say, okay, I get it now. And now I understand why it's so important. So that's what's really fun about this whole process of process of discovering.
Process. Thank you. Well, you've certainly helped our understanding of just, I think you've termed it like we have to increase the footprint of copper, decrease the footprint of iron
That's
to
right.
bring the boundaries
Yeah,
around oxidative stress.
that's exactly right.
And that's your curiosity, of asking better questions and connecting
Yeah,
all these dots
yeah.
and
And
just
have fun with it.
and keep it light, have fun with it, right? But I mean, today both of us are going to walk away here being like Andia. She's going to be a better addictions counselor, and for me, I've got some serious cases. Like I have some cancer clients right now that go to bed worrying about, and am I giving them the right information? And you've given me some really interesting things to think about. Yeah, so we
You
can't thank you enough.
Like, I just think about all the people who will listen to this who are in the recovery community who don't know these things
Mhm.
is gonna make a huge impact having people listen to this, and I cannot thank you enough.
No, I'm honored to have the chance to have the conversation and certainly open to continuing the dialogue as you see the fit and see the benefit.
Morley, we didn't get through. We got through, I think, about 5 questions. We're ready. When you're
Yeah,
ready,
well,
we're
that's
ready
great.
to have you
No, that's
back.
great. I look forward to it because it's each community has a different perspective. And over the years, I've learned to, you're certainly familiar with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers.
Yeah.
And you guys are Fred Astaire. And I'm Ginger Rogers. I'm dancing to your tune. And I've got to dance backwards, right? And I'm in high heels, but I can do it. And the thing is, I want the people in your community to feel at ease with this information. What I can tell you is what's going to happen. There's going to be a blowback. People are going to find out. They're going to start digging in. And they're going to say, "Well, he's against vitamin D, and he's against ascorbic acid, and he's against this and that," and that's fine. Let's have a conversation about that, and let's explain how and why we came to that conclusion. So that again, there's no value in knowing something. It's important to understand it. And so I welcome the chance to have a Q&A or to get to a deeper level of understanding for your community, because that's where the real magic happens. Happy to do that.
Well, we will follow up on that.
Okay.
And I guess we should probably finish here from our point of view, you always give this wonderful salutation. I'm going to give you our one in the quantum biological space is we want to wish you quantum coherence, and I'll throw it back at you. Avate.
Oh, thank you so much. Merci. Merci.
Bienvenue.
Yeah, no, it's been a delight. And when we have our online training, we have an RCP Institute. We typically will have between 10 and 12 time zones represented in the students around the globe. And it's like, wow, where did they hear about this? How do they, and it's just, we're in a very global time frame. And it's fascinating that this knowledge is working its way around, and happy to be a part of that process. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much again, and thank you everyone for listening. We will see you next time. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this podcast. We want to thank our sponsor, Viva Rays, who allows for us to get this information to you. They offer top-of-the-line blue blocking glasses, which, as we know, are critical for our health these days for blocking artificial light at night. Over 90% of our time is spent indoors under artificial lights, and this puts us all prone to circadian rhythm disruption. You can use the code QuantumHealthy for a discount. Link is in the show notes.
Thank you so much for listening to the Quantum Healthy podcast. We hope you found some value in this information. And if you feel inspired, please share it and leave us a 5-star review. This will help us reach so many more people. If you want to connect with Laura, you can find her at laurakistmanwellness.com and Andia at andiaray.com. Links are below in the show notes. Now, go find some sunlight and embrace your own quantum healthy.